In this video, I'll be going over my technique in covering a license tag with pre-printed paper. Now these sheets you can pick up at your local craft store. This is a 12 by 12. It's by the Paper Studio. Normally 69 cents. We were able to get them at half price. And this is Faith Works. Being that they're 12 by 12 and our license tag is 6 by 12, that will give us 2 sheets. We'll cut this in half and we'll be able to do 2 different tags or have another sheet for another project. I do suggest trying to use the top portion because these letters on the back will show through a bit once you finish your tag. So we're going to cut this 6 inches. We always like to keep a sheet down or something to kind of protect the piece we're working with. We cut this at 6 inches. We're going to just size it to the tag just to make sure we got a good fit. And now what I'm going to do is spray it to protect it, which will be, in this case, Krylon Clear. Okay, now we want to, like I say, spray a protective coat over our image. Once again, I like to put a clean sheet down underneath my image and come through and try to put your nice even coat. Put that light coat on, let it sit and dry, come back and inspect it, and then you can put your next coat on. So while we're letting the image dry, let's just prep our tag. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is a reclaimed tag. If it's a new tag, you shouldn't have to worry about it. But with a reclaimed tag, I just like to gently go over this to not lose any debris or anything that may have gotten stuck in the paint during that process. We just do this to make sure we got a smooth tag, because anything that shows up on the tag that's in between the tag and the image, the paper, it will show up in your finished product. If it's a new tag, chances are you won't have to, but at the same time inspect it, make sure it's smooth, and from there we like to work on a clean surface. So you might find yourself swapping out your working surface quite often. At this point, I like to take a little rubbing alcohol to clean the tag of any oils or something of that matter that may have came in contact with the tag. Let that sit and dry. Okay, we have let that first coat dry a little bit, so now I'm going to spray the second coat. I'm going to let that coat sit and dry. Okay, now we're going to add our third coat. Like I said, just take your time. Make sure it's nice and even. Okay, now once your front side is completely dry, will be the time, if you have any little flecks or anything in it, lint, to try to flick them out. Then you're going to want to come and apply a nice coat on the back. If you have to do it in small spurts, I would suggest do it not to drench it at one time, but to lightly cover it and let it dry. So we'll go through that process now. Okay, now that your front side is completely dry, if you have any lint or anything that has gotten trapped in it, now would be the best time to try to flick it off. You want to at least apply one good coat on the back, but you don't want to do it all at one time. You don't want it heavy, so just lightly come through and add your first coat. Once you have sprayed it, you're going to want to go ahead and lift it and put it on another sheet to protect the front. So put your clean sheets down and go ahead and lay it then face down, but you don't want to leave it on the sheet that you sprayed it on. You want to make sure, check it for what kind of coverage you have. Once this dry, come back and spray another coat on if needed. But let it thoroughly dry before you add your next coat. Once that first coat has dried on the back, you want to take it, go ahead and use the sheet, that fresh sheet you put it down on to protect the front, to keep it clean. Go ahead and take that sheet and apply your next coat. Once you applied your second coat, carefully lift it and place it to dry. As I was saying, carefully lift it, place you down some new sheets for the face side, and then let that dry. Also, I want to remind you that during this process, on both sides, while you're spraying your clear, be careful not to touch it during the drying process because it will pick up your fingerprints. Okay, once you've allowed the back to dry, just inspect it to make sure you have good coverage. Check it for any foreign debris. Same as with the front. And go ahead and line your image up. To hold my image in place, I like to use some wax paper or something. This here happens to be from the back of a permanent vinyl. I'm going to just use it, something slippery that's not going to stick. It's not rough or heavy. And you want to get it, your image lined up, and slip this over the end. And once you're satisfied with the alignment, just use some of these clamps and clamp the image in place on the tag. And see, as I align this end up, it's going to cause it to shift, and when it does, all I do at that point is loosen up the clamps and just reclamp them to take up the slack. Now when I do it this way, I find it easier to line up as opposed to having it cut on the cutter and then aligning it to the tag. When you cut it on the cutter, it cuts out the holes as well. Okay, once you have your tag lined up, you're going to want to spray it. And we're going to use Gorilla Spray adhesive. At this point, you like to have a clean sheet in order to protect your image as well. To start, we're going to spray half the tag. Make sure you got a good spray pattern. And spray your tag. Making sure you get your corners. Also at this point, spray half of your paper. Now let that sit. Now, in order for it to have a stronger bond, you're going to want to let that sit for at least a minute. I also suggest the paper that you sprayed, removing it from underneath the tag, being very careful not to let it slip, but remove that and replace it with some clean sheets. And now, at this point, I like to take a tissue and just slowly let the image roll on itself. Stand within the middle. I'm not going to the edge because I don't want to force any of the spray from under the edge at this moment. Because if you get adhesive on the face of the image, you're going to have trouble. Okay, so now we just flip it, and we're going to remove the clamps from this end and a little protective sheet. Now just to give us a little leverage, we'll place those under there as such. Peel back the side you do not spray. Peel it right up into where the spray is. At this point, I also like to take make sure your image and your tag is clean. And now, just prop it up. We want to spray a coat on this, but in order to do this, I like to put a sheet over my image as such to protect it. Now we'll spray this second half and spray a little over the image. And see, once again, that's why I like to use this sheet in order to protect the face of my image. I'm not going to go all the way up here as far to where my thumb is. Just place some in that area. Make sure you catch your edge and let that sit for at least a good minute. Okay, after you sprayed it, you want to switch your paper out. Now you want to just slowly work the middle, once again allowing the image to roll onto the tag freely. Just work in the middle. Now as you press the image on the tag, I suggest working from the middle outward. Do not go over the edge or work your edge. And the reason you don't want to go over the edge is you don't want to risk getting any of the adhesive onto your tissue. Apply a nice even amount of pressure along your edge. Now just eyeball it and apply a nice even pressure throughout the tag. When you get to your holes where the screws will go ahead and press those in. Now I have learned that using tissue as opposed to a paper towel, tissue is softer. A paper towel has streaked some of my images, finishes in the past. So just apply your even amount. Okay, now for the finish, just take and go along your edge, applying an even pressure, watching for any of the adhesive to spill from under the edge. At that point you want to make sure you switch your napkin, your tissue out. This is our basic way of doing it. Like I said, just make sure you have the slots to where your screws will be pressed in. Just make sure your edges are nice and smooth. And once again, I would like to add, be very careful when handling your tag in the image, making sure you have no debris caught under the image, because it will show in your finished product. So now we're going to set this to the side and let it dry, and we'll come back and trim the edges and the slots. Okay, now that you've allowed it to completely dry, what you want to do is come and cut your tag out. You want to cut your slots out and cut the frame of the tag out. So just get something to protect your surface. So just get something to protect your surface. And I like to cut out on the back side, especially when I'm doing my slots. Don't put a lot of pressure down on it. You basically just scoring it, and once you complete this, you'll flip it to the front side and do your final cuts. Please be careful during this phase because you will be using a sharp edge, and if you need a supervision, please obtain it before doing this part. I find it easier to go about it this way as of to trying to line it up using a cutter to go ahead and do the pre-cuts and then trying to size and line it up. I really find it easier just to go ahead and line the complete image onto your tag, and then when you're ready, come back and cut the image out. Like I say, be very careful at this point, and if you need adult supervision, please get an adult to assist you at this point. Once again, I like to say, if you need supervision when doing this, please obtain it, because you will be using sharp items to complete this part of the tag. And if it's not needed, just be very careful. In your corners, as you cut your corners, you want to use kind of like a downward twisting, going with the curve motion as you cut your corners out. So this is the method I use for covering a license plate using pre-printed paper if I don't have sublimation inks or the process set up for sublimation. Hopefully this will be helpful to someone that's interested in decorating a tag, and thank you for watching. This is my pre-printed paper tag. All I really have to do now is to seal it with resin, and it's complete. But being that the person I'm making this tag for will like lettering on it, I like trusting in the Lord with all your heart. That's Proverbs 3 and 5. Got this cut out, and we're going to apply it to the tag. And the main thing is, first, getting this lined up. I just went ahead and cut each letter out, and I'm going to apply them that way. Maybe should have tried that in a different color, silver, maybe white or yellow, but we're going to go with that. Now I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum acrylic lacquer gloss crystal clear to coat it, to seal it. Okay, so that is our first coat. I'm going to let that sit and dry. Spread light. As you see, all the spots aren't quite covered, but spread on light because you don't want it to run, especially at this stage. So we're going to let that sit and dry. And we'll come back and add a second coat. Our first coat is dry. We'll add a second coat. Okay, now if you can tell it's a little bit thicker, that's our second coat. For our final top coat, I'll be using the Krylon Triple Thick Crystal Clear Glaze. This acts more like a resin. It's pretty thick. I'm hoping this acts more like a resin for the top coat to finally seal it. This will act more like a resin for a top coat to finally seal it. First coat, clear glaze. Now when you're spraying your top coats, your sealer and your glaze, Be very careful to try to avoid any kind of contaminants getting into it. If it's fresh while you spray it, go ahead and try to find something to perhaps pick it out at this time, because if you let it dry, it's going to dry into your top coat, into your finished image. Okay, now with the second coat, I will let this sit and completely dry, and we'll consider perhaps one more coat, but right now it's looking pretty good. That's our second coat. Like I said, be careful when you're handling it, as far as with fingerprints or any kind of debris getting into the image. So we'll set this aside and let it dry. So now I'm going to just set it to the side and let it dry. And the back, just a little coat sprayed over it, just to give it a little coverage. Then we just sprayed it back to clean it up.